Agent Morris with the NSA.
There is something real here.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the first-hand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General. Biologics came to some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Those could represent exquisite new adversary technology.
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still in the program.
The government is covering up some level of its knowledge and understanding about what some of those things are.
The Sol Foundation, which just announced a new initiative for UFO research and policy.
It's nuts, man. I mean, we're just small-town buds who saw a UFO in the woods. I mean, now we're hanging out with the government.
Wow.
What floor were you guys on?
Hello and welcome to another edition of Anomaly Now, straight out of Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Miles Lewis. This is the weekly, sometimes live, not today, news and media roundup for the 501c3 nonprofit Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives. Thank you for tuning in live or Memorex, watching the recorded vodcast, or listening to the archived podcast, whatever way you choose to interact with this recording. Thank you for doing so. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that fun stuff. Hey, it's been a couple weeks. Sorry we've missed doing the show for a while now, but I'm glad to be here and hopefully gonna charge right through a bunch of interesting news. You can, of course, go to our Flipboard, our news aggregation link. That's flipboard.com/@Anomaly-Archives. And you can link through and find the full links to all of our headline news archives. And of course, we archive those at the website, anomalyarchives.org. And you can go to our patreon.com/Anomaly-Archives and find out about, hey, we've got another monthly Anomaly Academy lecture that's coming up this Sunday. Oh, excuse me. Oh, Saturday, April 26th, 2025. That's going to be at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, Central Eastern Daylight Savings. No, none of that. Whatever. Anyway, 6 p.m. Austin time, Saturday, April 26th, with our presenter, Michael M. Hughes, who will be presenting on the truth about witchcraft. Going to be a fascinating lecture. Hope you'll join us for that. Again, you can go to patreon.com/Anomaly-Archives and find out more about that. If you subscribe to the Anomaly Academy tier, you get the Anomaly Academy Cadet tier. You get access to these live monthly events, as well as the growing back catalog of previous months' events. So, man, yeah, so 2 weeks ago or so was the fantastic Archives of the Impossible, the UFO and the Impossible. This was the latest annual conference of the Rice University Archive of the Impossible, of course, founded by Jeff Kripal there in Houston, Texas. And they didn't have a conference last year. I was honored to be on a panel on their inaugural conference in 2028. They had another one in 2023, but they skipped last year. But they've started back up, and they've got another one planned for next year that's all going to be about art and the impossible. But this was just fantastic. Really can't encourage people enough to look into this. I really wanted to do a deep dive into this conference. It was fantastic. It is so important what this conference covered. But we're going to save the deep dive for some time in the near future. But for now, I just wanted to give you a brief overview, quick glance at some of the presenters that were featured in the first 2 days of this 3-day conference. And let's just see about that. So yes, this was featured a number of different people, of course, introductions by Diana Pasulka, as well as Jeff Kripal, who were basically acting as the hosts, and retired Rear Admiral Timothy Galladay was there, giving, of course, a talk on USOs, unidentified submarine objects. That was a very fascinating lecture. I was really glad to have the opportunity to see him speak more at length than I had in the past. Of course, there was a great presentation by Gary Nolan called Standards, Evidence, Rhetoric, and Consequences. I was really a little shocked and happy to see him go off on debunkers in a way that I thought was important. And as much as I have mixed feelings about him and his creation of the Sol Foundation, I do generally think it's all for the best. But it was really good to see him give this kind of a presentation where I thought he gave people who are interested in these subjects, like I'm sure you are, the kind of framework to push back against debunkers who think that they're being scientific in their skepticism. And he was certainly being skeptical, but he was talking about the importance of standards of evidence and how debunkers and skeptics are often not even coming to an even playing field when they come to the table to try to engage with information on this subject. Another person, Carl Nell, gave a fantastic presentation, Epistemology and Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. I was really actually amazed at his talk. I know, I had watched his presentation for the Sol Foundation and have heard many things about him, but had not seen him really go into detail about his ideas and perspective. And this talk really actually blew me away. I was really surprised at how taken I was by his presentation. We'll go into more detail later, but again, he, like following on Gary Nolan's presentation, and talked about the importance of standards of evidence, but again, how there really is a preponderance of evidence supporting the reality of these phenomena that should warrant our engaging and interrogating the evidence and taking it to the next level. Several people had pointed out that he gave an updated version of this chart that he provided in a previous lecture about basically the disclosure campaign timeline. And of course, it is a little behind, as he described. It is due to the lack of progress with the UAP Disclosure Act and that sort of thing. But beyond that, he did a wide-ranging deep dive. He did not describe each of the boxes you see here in this epistemology of UAP origin hypotheses, but it was very, he started out just kind of slowly popping these into the slide until he got to this almost full version here, where he talks about just a variety of different branches of hierarchy of taxonomy of hypotheses of the origin of unidentified anomalous phenomena, and the overlap and the potential different ways of looking at these. Very, very interesting stuff. And he then in this slide was talking about the overlaps with the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis and other paranormal aspects, describing them as amenable to formal logic, amenable to the scientific method, and amenable to mathematical encapsulation. Very interesting stuff. Again, we'll go into deeper dives on this in the future, I hope. A really good presentation by Wesley Waters, formerly Impossible Objects, Falling Stones, and the Dawn of Meteoritics. This really reminded me of presentations by Patrick Quige, talking about how falls of stones from the sky have been disbelieved for a long time. But Waters went into some great examples of how, wow, the widely dismissed witness testimony was later proven to be true and accurate, and advanced the humanity's knowledge of these phenomena. Kevin Knuth went on. I don't think this is necessarily the title, The Materialist Worldview, Evil Villain, ? But he gave a very provocative and strange presentation whereby he kind of started out by talking about analyzing fiction and used the example of the children's book The Little Prince and doing basically mathematical analysis of the words and the letters, and came up with some very strange findings that he says challenge our ideas about what we would expect to find. But he also went on to describe the potential relevance to what he was trying to convey to the issues of synchronicity, which I was not expecting at all. So he really surprised me with this presentation, considering so many of his past presentations were more straight astronomy oriented. Peter Skafish, of the other co-founder of with Gary Nolan of the Sol Foundation, gave a lecture. He read from his paper. It was very powerful. Forget the title. Basically has to do with the possible objective reality of the bodies, the entities, the occupants of UFO UAP. Gosh, it was a good title, and I'm spacing on it. Whoops. All right. Well, anyway, yeah, Peter Skafish gave a very powerful lecture. He literally was reading from his paper. And as Karen Austin, the kind of envoy from the John Mack collection, who has been there at Rice University for quite some time now, working on this new metadata project, she gave some commentary on Peter's lecture, but then proceeded to do what she was there to do, which was introduce the different panel members of the ethics and metadata project. So the big news here is that the Archives of the Impossible, Rice University, they are basically transitioning their organization to what they're calling the Center for the Impossible. And they are finally kind of rolling out and describing the efforts with regard to their progress on their metadata project, whereby they are taking all those thousands of letters from the Whitley Strieber and Anne Strieber collection, the communion letters, as they're known, as well as the other experiencer contact narratives that are amassing in the archive. And Amanda Foki, who is the head person there at the Special Collections, described the phases of this project and where they are so far. This is all new information as far as I'm aware, and very exciting news. And I got to say, this experiencer metadata project panel was really powerful, fascinating, and that's where I really think the important research is happening. Finally, we're seeing an assimilation and a processing of this most important experiencer data that has so long been ignored, especially in this post-2017 environment where military witnesses and videos are focused on, and the witnesses aren't even focused on in terms of how it affected them. But this is all very, very good. And Kimberly Ingalls here gave a really great presentation. She had two different presentations, and one this day and one the next day, that we'll talk about in the future. But yes, this importance of keeping it all on the table, as she said, and Karen Austin said, that they are trying to utilize modalities like phenomenology to help us better understand the experiencer and the experience itself, and not dismiss these experiences. As it says here, our metadata project aims to put more experience back on the table faster. We want to move to the interpretive step and test out explanatory models. We need to partner with sciences to do this. Now, jumping towards the end of the program, the next day on day 3, this is a shot from the audience. That is Eric Davis, the physicist who's worked so closely with Hal Puthoff and others, and who is considered by some to be one of the most advanced physicists dealing with the UFO, UAP subject. And the crowd was really eating up his commentary from there within the audience towards the end of this event. And of course, folks like Whitley Strieber were there and were often engaging the speakers in the presentations as well during the Q&A after each presentation. And you can see there in the background behind him, blurred in the background, is Leslie Kane. So anyway, just really excited to watch that. I was not able to attend in person, but the live stream was great, and really looking forward to when they finally post those videos. We'll of course create a playlist of those videos when they post them to YouTube so that folks can watch those. And let's see. Well, so let's move right along. Like I mentioned, we've got a Patreon event coming up soon, and that is featuring Michael M. Hughes, The Truth About Witchcraft. That's coming up this Saturday, April 26th at 6 p.m. Central Time. So yes, you can go to our Flipboard and find links to some of the articles that we'll be talking about, plus many, many other articles as well. There is just so much that has occurred in the past weeks since we last had our show, but I did want to alert you. We have created a playlist and embedded it on our website for the Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena Conference that's put on by the SCU, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. Yes, over at the Anomaly Archives, you can find a page that we've created for their 2024 conference. They've been just recently finally posting the conference videos for last year's 2024 conference that was emceed by Micah Hanks and featured Ross Coulthart as their keynote speaker. You can click through and go to our YouTube channel's playlist where you'll be able to see all the different videos that have both been posted so far. The most recent one was posted just 6 days ago and is a panel discussion about all their different projects that they're working on. Great stuff, and highly recommend that. There are new information. Let's see. There's a video I have not had the chance to watch, but Daniel Sheehan's New Paradigm Institute has been putting out information about this event called UFO Hackathon over there on the West Coast. And there is about an 20-minute video titled UAP Technology Commercialization, featuring Jesse Michaels, Danny Sheehan, Peter Skafish, and I think I saw Deep Prasad maybe moderating that panel discussion, but that looks to be very interesting. Meanwhile, in the realm of conspiracy theory promulgation, yes, there are legislators trying to pass laws to limit quote unquote chemtrail dispersion. And of course, many of the theories and conspiracy ideas surrounding what that might be about, if you believe in that sort of thing, is that it's about climate change and weather modification. And sure enough, over at the Telegraph is this article: experiments to dim the sun will be approved within weeks. That's, of course, going to give lots of new fire to these conspiracy theories. Jumping back to the UFO UAP angle and the SCU, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, they have put out 2 new episodes on their Anomalous Review podcast, which I highly recommend. I've only watched the short version. They're now putting out these, it's called their UAP Witness Series, where members of the SCU who've had UFO sightings are being interviewed about them. And I already liked this Anomalous Review podcast. They've had a great number of great guests and a number of great discussions and interviews there. But this new series is, I think, a very good turn of events. And like the Rice conference, the AOTI Archives of the Impossible conference is slowly shifting some perspective to the witnesses, which I think is very important. Of course, SCU has focused on physical materialist science type approaches to studying UFO, UAP sightings, and that is all very important. But as we have lamented on the show many, many times for years, that too much of this kind of nuts and bolts approach excludes the importance of the experiencer, the witness, the person having the observation or experience. And in this first inaugural episode, they feature a talk with engineer Mike Pritchard, who seems to be a pretty interesting character unto himself. And in the short version, which is the only one I've watched so far, he describes his and his son's witnessing of a apparent UAP while they were on the road leaving Breckenridge, Colorado. Very interesting details that get to some of the weird aspects of people's witnessing of UFOs, even when they don't graduate to the level of quote unquote close encounters of the third kind or entity cases. Some of those interesting aspects that he observes were that he and his son, even though he was already interested in UFOs beforehand, having never had a sighting or an experience, he and his son seemingly repressed not the memory of it, but just talking about it for months. And Mike Pritchard describes how he was really having stress. He didn't want to minimize post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, by saying that it was that level for him, but that's towards that level that he described. Like, he just felt really stressed because during the experience, there was a point at which he and his son felt compelled to leave the area, like they had a sense of urgency that they needed to be somewhere. somewhere else. Anyway, I highly recommend you check that out. I think it's worth a look. Of course, new stuff over at the Black Vault. Paul Smith has a new newsletter out where he talks about his participation at the Rice and University event. He and Peter Skafish, moderated by Jeff Kripal, did a fireside chat wherein they discussed a freewheeling approach to thinking about the UFO UAP phenomenon problem. Other links that we've got over at the Flipboard, some really disturbing news from science.org. Trump administration targets academic journals with attorney letter, proposed funding cuts. I'm sure that won't surprise anybody who's been following the current administration's attacks and cuts on science and science-related activities. Meanwhile, of course, there is this new administration's attempt at alleged transparency with regards to past controversial assassinations, and from JFK to RFK to MLK. We've reported on the massive JFK document dumps. Over at Substack is another article. RFK assassination documents have been released. Other interesting headlines: medical cannabis shows potential to fight cancer. Largest ever study finds. This is being reported by The Guardian. Now, this is the kind of thing, again, that people in the counterculture, in conspiracy culture, in the non-traditional information, alternative media culture environment have been saying for years, that there's been evidence for this in other research. But now we see that it's finally making it into the mainstream, at least via outlets such as The Guardian, who are more or less respected, not perfect, but also from The Guardian. Scientists hail, quote, strongest evidence so far for life beyond our solar system. There's new data on a potential planet with life out there. We've got a couple of different articles on cattle mutilation. This one over from Coast to Coast, though, points out that it seems pretty clear that there was a human involved in this particular one. But then there's another one that has not so much cattle mutilations, but I think, many missing cattle in a different location. Over at Metabunk, Nick West's forum, there is a thread on the USS Jackson Tic Tac UAP, which I found interesting and timely. There's been recently this new witness and evidence coming out about a quote-unquote Tic Tac-like UFO sighted by the USS Jackson. Well, in that talk by Tim Galladay on day one of the Rice AOTI Archives of the Impossible conference, he described how after he appeared in the UAP hearing, he was inundated by witnesses, particularly military witnesses, particularly Navy military witnesses. And he said that he's been in contact with somebody who was on one of the other, the sister ship of the USS Jackson when there was all this UAP activity, and who also had witness experience while on the USS Jackson, describing it as so common that he and his crewmates were becoming desensitized to these UAP UFOs. I'm not sure if that's the same witness as described in this latest footage that I think has been, of course, released by Jeremy Corbell, and of course talked about with George Knapp. But yeah, that's out there. You can check that out. Some other very interesting items coming out now. In Gary Nolan's Rice AOTI presentation, he alluded to the Skywatcher project, which of course is the project with quote unquote UFO whistleblower Jake Barber that is, really promoting these ideas of psionics and the government's use of psi ability in humans to call, like a dog whistle, UFOs, UAP into an area in order to document them and probably capture them. Well, Skywatcher, which of course is funded mainly, I suppose, we don't really know all the details, but by this Alex Klokus, wealthy person who is connected to the SALT conference series, where Carl Nell made his explosive statement about totally believing that there are NHI here interacting with humans on our planet. Well, Gary Nolan in his AOTI speech mentioned that, yes, he had just come back from participating in a Skywatcher recording program, and that he's been part of their research effort He spoke highly of their efforts, but I gotta say, having watched the video, which you can see over at YouTube, I am not convinced, and of course, not surprisingly, nor is Mick West and his skeptical, crowdsourced skeptics, debunkers, whatever you want to call them, over at metabunk.org. It seems pretty clear to me and to others, many of us who actually do believe that there is a legitimate UFO phenomena and a probable NHI, non-human intelligence, at play potentially in these phenomena. It just looks like what they're showing in the Skywatcher video is what is become known as sky debris, balloons and other blown material. I am not impressed by what is being shown as evidence in the Skywatcher Part 2 mapping the unknown video that's been recently released. I would encourage you to check it out if you feel so inclined, but one of the other interesting things that's come about from Mick West and others looking into it is they have identified the location, and guess what? It's in West Texas, and it's a big plot of land out in West Texas where folks have shot zombie movies and done lots of military weapons fire testing. And yeah, if you're going to look at the actual video over at YouTube, I also encourage you to read the thread about it over at metabunk.org. This other YouTube video I highly recommend, called The Art of Poison Pilling Music Files. Now, that name really doesn't exactly give you a sense of what that's about, but this Ben Jordan fellow, whom I really became aware of and I reported on the show before, did an excellent mini documentary on the mystery hum phenomena. He's a musician and has lots of, I think, important insights into this culture that we are living enmeshed in now of streaming music, and how most of us don't buy music anymore, and how that is horribly negatively impacting artists, musicians who are trying to make a living through their music. And of course, the matters are being made worse, as he and others have reported, how so many of these services like Spotify and YouTube and others are radically utilizing AI to circumvent their requirements to pay royalties to musicians, to artists, for the music that they are profiting from. And this Ben Jordan fellow, he has an amazing mind and the technical chops to do some amazing work in trying to disrupt that. So if that interests you at all, I would highly recommend you go check that out. Meanwhile, jumping back to the Rice University thing, there is over at their at a YouTube channel a video talking about the latest conference and the archives in general, and they're trying to become this new center for the impossible, and it's titled Exploring the Unexplained, a new chapter in the archives of the impossible. And also SUAPs that I mentioned, Society for UAP Studies.org, have part 2 of a classroom series put on by Kimberly Ingalls, Phenomenology of UAP Part 2. I haven't attended any of those, but considering how powerful her 2 presentations at the Rice AOTI event were, I think they've got to be very, very important. And similarly, over at PsiHacking, psihacking.com, this new white paper, Phenomenology and Physiology of Telepathy in UAP CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Encounters, looks to be pretty interesting. It's more of a, like it says, a white paper. It's not like a narrative article, but that also is worth your time. For those of you who've long been looking into this phenomena of the possibility of NHI and strange phenomena in consciousness and encounters with unknown, mysterious, quote-unquote, alien others, there's been a name that has probably come across your path, and that is Teilhard de Chardin. This article over at the ncregister.com by Edward Penton goes into the rise of his greater acceptance, which I find rather interesting, titled Teilhard de Chardin's Ideas Find Resonance Inside the Vatican 70 Years After His Death. That might interest you as well. Let's see. There also is this new PSIGamesInternational.com website where there's basically now a new Psychic Olympics being hosted by and organized by a friend of and or fellow remote viewer. I found out about this person through listening to an interview with Paul H. Smith, where he was talking about his remote viewing experience. And I'm blanking on the man's name who is the organizer of this, but I'm very intrigued, and you can find out more about that over at psigamesinternational.com. That's psigamesinternational.com. Well, let's see. Before we wrap up here, if you're a fan of ghostly stories of mystery trains, ghost trains, over at The Observer on Substack is part 1 and 2 of Echoes on the Rails. They ride the rails with a quote-unquote phantom train expert in an attempt to understand this persistent phenomenon. That looks to be very interesting. Over at dailygrail.com, Greg Taylor has an excellent article called Hyperstition Your Way to the Red Planet. Are Elon Musk's Mars goals an attempt to make fiction reality? Greg Taylor is doing a great job of talking about what some have described as a digital coup happening in our country at the hands of the tech broocracy, as described by others. This concerning takeover of various government agencies by the people who are working for current administration, and especially for Elon Musk. I'll just say you may want to check that out if you have any interest in that. There's also this weird article, The Ankler, at theankler.com, Eternal Celebrities, the Multi-Billion Opportunity Coming. This is, of course, all about the idea of resurrecting deceased and promoting into the future people's likeness, their virtual being as artificial intelligence avatars. We've already seen a little of this in weird ways with, holographic Tupac playing at Coachella and things like that, but it's just going to get weirder and weirder, folks. Yes, here's that article I mentioned about nearly 200 cows disappeared. The case remains cold. Now, this isn't a cattle mutilation story yet, and probably just has to do a prosaic explanation of cattle rustling, but there seems to be maybe an increase in these strange cases of missing, disappeared cattle. All right. Yet again, I highly recommend Tanner Boyle's Getting Spooked blog. This excellent article, The Cultural Cold War and Alien Abduction, I highly recommend. Many of you have probably heard about this idea that the CIA was funding and supporting certain art movements here in the United States and promoting them abroad as a way of trying to promote Western American values and culture. And Tanner goes into exploring this from that perspective, but talking about the alien abduction phenomenon, especially as pictured here, a photo of a young Bud Hopkins, of course, the preeminent, most widely known perhaps abduction researcher who has passed, but very interesting essay there. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend everything by Tanner Boyle over at Getting Spooked. There's this article over at Smithsonian Magazine called A Peculiar Short-Lived Office at the Smithsonian. Once explored reports of bizarre natural phenomena. Why wouldn't they? That's what science is all about. Meanwhile, you can watch a video from the previous, I think, SCU conference, Dr. Kevin Newth's presentation, Science and the Mishandling of Anomalies. Anyway, there's a ton of other stuff and these great part 1 and part 2 forbidden sketches, hand-drawn artwork inspired by the published journals of Jacques Vallée by our dear friend Red Pill Junkie Miguel Romero. I love his art so much, and I've loved these books so much. As I say almost every episode, I am still trying to finish Forbidden Science Volume 5 so that I can get into reading Volume 6, the final volume. And it is, as always, just so filled with information. It just takes me so long because I'm taking so many notes. Plus, I don't read enough or as often as I'd like to, but I try to make that effort. And it's books like this that always get me to make that effort. But Red Pill Junkie makes some great artwork exploring what he finds in those books. And as you'll see here, there's just a ton of artwork. He has produced little sketches, and he usually gives, the page number and the quote that inspired it. In this case, the quote is, he saw his body lying there, and his recollection is that they were handling one of his eyes and pointing at him. That's why he had the impression of being outside his body. And I think this is captioned, the Antelope Valley witness had a long history of high strangeness encounters, including a classic, quote-unquote, abduction event in which the aliens removed one of his eyes from his skull socket. Yikes. And just a ton of great and fun, interesting images, again, inspired by the journals of Jacques Vallée. Forbidden Science, really Love that stuff. All right. I guess that's going to do it for now. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. And as always, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. It all does really help us. We're really trying to get our numbers up on our number of subscribers on our YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can go to our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Anomaly Archives. And even if you can't afford to support us even $1 or $2 a month, you can join for free. And that does get you access to updates and newsletters. And of course, as I mentioned, coming up this Saturday at 6 p.m. Central, our April lecturer, Michael M. Hughes, presents The Truth About Witchcraft, Saturday, April 26th. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. Peace, love, and understanding.